If you could take your seats, we're going to get started. Good evening. I'm Colette Bancroft, the Secretary of the Board of the National Book Critics Circle. And on behalf of the board, I'd like to welcome you all to the readings by our Book Awards finalists. This is a bit of a swan song for me. For 17 years, I was an endangered species, a full-time newspaper book critic at the Tampa Bay Times. For most of that time, I was on the NBCC board. And now I'm retired from the job, and I'm cycling off the board after a total of 4 terms. In these years on the board, I've read a mountain of wonderful books and argued about them with an all-star team of brilliant people. We often hear that book criticism is dying or morphing into some rough beast, but we live in times where criticism may be more necessary than ever. And I can tell you that in the NBCC, it is alive and thriving. We're still the world's best book club. Thanks. We would like to thank Julia and Jared Drake from Wildbound and all of our other sponsors for their generous support of this event. And if you are feeling generous, yes. And if you are feeling generous, there's a QR code at the bottom of your program that will let you make donations. Each year, the NBCC gives book awards in 8 categories, and this year we have 42 finalists. Tonight, 24 of those writers are joining us to read brief excerpts from their book. The finalist books range widely across styles, subjects, and genres, but what they share is excellence, and we're proud to present them. In the interest of time, I'll be introducing each group, 5 groups, briefly. Please hold your applause until the end of the readings, and please be sure your phone is silenced. Our first group of readers. Okay, before I introduce? Okay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to tonight's National Book Critics Circle finalist reading. My name is Lori Lynn Turner. I'm the Associate Director of the Creative Writing Program. We are very proud to have co-hosted the NBCC readings and award ceremonies here at the New School for over 20 years, plus now, I think. I have a few thank yous, and then we'll start the evening. And I always say you can never say enough thank yous, right? Okay, first at the New School, John Reed, who's the director of the Creative Writing Program, Mary Carmelik, Bianca Lomani, Lizette Bohr, Hajab Ahmed, Camila Marchis Gonzalez, Rebecca Baldwin, and all of our friends in Events IT who are working tonight. Also the PT Knitwear Bookstore and Wildbound and Be Live. And NBCC, I would like to thank all the board members and especially Adam Delva, the president, Christopher yes. Christopher Ermshire, clap. Iris Jamal Dunkel, Heather Scott Partington, and thank you finalists for writing the books we honor tonight, and the audience here and on live stream. Now I'd like to welcome back to the stage and turn the evening over to NBCC board member Colette Bancroft.
Thanks, Lori Lynn, and big thanks to Lori Lynn for all that she does, and it's a lot. All right, our first group of readers are Kevin Young, Miriam Taves, Omar El-Akkad, Katie Kitamura, and Gardner Harris. And I welcome you to the stage.
Good evening. I'm Kevin Young. It's an honor to be here tonight. I'm going to be reading from Night Watch, and I'm going to read just from the end sequence, which is called Darkling, and it's a riff off Dante's Inferno, his Purgatorio, and his Paradiso, the Divine Comedy. This is called Ledge. No use telling the dead what you've learned, since they've learnt it too. how to go on without you, the mercy of mourning or moving, the light that persists, even if. Beauty is as beauty does, my mother says, who is beautiful and speaks loud so she can be understood, unlike poets who can't talk to save their lives, so they write. It's like a language loss can be learnt only by living there. What anchors us to this thirst and earth, its threats and thinnesses, its ways of waning and making the most of worse and much worse, if not this light lifting up over the ridge? This is called Ditch. There's a few writers. They all ended up in purgatory. Don't ask me why. Ditch. Day he died, Samuel Beckett's father, doctor said, was doing better. Doctor scarcely out the door when dear dad collapsed, sweet pea all over his face. At the promise, Beckett had donned the brightest clothes he could find. Later watched last words fall from dad's pained mouth. Fight, 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 and what a morning. 3 days after, Beckett wrote his friend, I cannot write about him, the letter proof to the contrary. I can only walk the fields and climb the ditches after him, his father buried between the mountains and the sea. God love thee, Sam. Potential epitaphs. 1, your turn. 2, what more do you want from me? 3, based on my infant son's favorite phrase. All done. And this last poem is called Yellow Jacket. Yellow Jacket. The way wasps want your house to be their house, so the dead try and make your home their own. They move in, promising to stay only a week, luggage stuffed with old clothes and tinted photographs, building their houses of paper, buzzing. They draw the curtains, de-silver the mirrors, till years later look about and it's your life the dead are living. Wake and rub the night from your eyes, the paper fetched wet from the yard, the paid death notices and ads for living longer unread. Mine, not the wings for such a flight. Each day, later than you like, the lonely postman force feeds words into the hungry mouth of the mailbox, where this small, dunning bird has begun its brittle, briefest nest. Thank you.
Okay, that was really beautiful, Kevin. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. And my name is Miriam Taves, and the book is A Truce That Is Not Peace. And a while ago, somebody told me that you can write about your exes as long as you say that they were the best lover you ever had, and then they won't come after you with any defamation stuff. And so I repeated mantras to myself: relinquish control, relinquish words, relinquish language. There is no such thing as letters. There are no words left in the universe, nothing left to rearrange. I walked and walked quickly so I wouldn't freeze, and imagined that I was walking away from words, that the words were frozen under the thick ice, that I was stamping them out with my feet as I walked, one after another, creating a vast icy distance between them and me. At first, when I started walking on the river, I was almost the only one out there on the ice, especially at night. But soon, it seemed,
A lot of people started going there. Some of them were skating, some were hitting a puck along the ice with a hockey stick, some were even cycling, and there was one guy on a unicycle, but mostly they were walking, like me. One afternoon, I ran into a guy I knew when I was about 19, and he was almost 30. He would come to my empty apartment, I couldn't afford furniture, with beer and weed, and we'd sit on my mattress, which was on the floor by the window, and he'd share his theories with me, his philosophy of life. I can't remember what it was, but afterwards, we'd make love, and I remember his expertise, if that's the right word, his commitment to the act, my pleasure, his patience, and his friendliness, really. But now, when we met on the river, and I was in my 50s, and he was almost 70, it was it had a different feel to it, but not entirely. He was talking, again, as though he'd never stopped, about his theories and his philosophy of life. As he rambled on, I realized, or at least I thought, that he might be crazy. I don't know exactly why I thought that, and crazy was probably the wrong word. But after a minute or two of typical small talk, the kind people make when they haven't seen each other in 35 years, he began to talk about his ghosts, the ones who haunted him 24/7, and he began to show me scars from fights he'd been in. It was cold, of course, but he didn't seem to notice. He peeled off layers of clothing to show me the scars. There were a lot of them, and eventually he was standing there on the ice in his jeans and t-shirt, ranting about the ghosts and the cops and feminism and the banks and his mother and really the whole world, which had it in for him. As he was ranting, I kept thinking of him and me by the window in my empty apartment, drinking beer and smoking weed and making love, such amazing love. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I was freezing to death out there, listening to him, watching him remove layer after layer of clothing, and I told him I really had to go, but it sure was nice having had a chance to catch up. He nodded, he'd heard me, but he kept talking even as I said goodbye and walked away. I continued along the riverbank. People had tied ropes to branches, which you could use to pull yourself up to the street, and kept walking. Soon, I was walking on the city streets, not the river path, and I realized that I wasn't feeling cold. I wondered if it was because my body had frozen during the time I'd spent standing still and listening to my deranged but amazing old lover talk to me as he removed his clothing. And maybe I had lost all sensation, all feeling, and would soon be dead. And if that was the case, I thought, I'd better hurry. Thanks.
Hello. How y'all doing? Okay, I can work with that. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to the interpreter. My name is Omar. I'm a writer. It's an absolute honor to be here, and an absolute nightmare to be following Miriam Taves, who is one of my heroes. I'm going to be reading from a book called One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This, and I'm just going to read you the first couple of pages. She is fog-colored when they find her. She believes she has ended. Like porters in service of some grotesque nobility, 6 men carry the stretcher out of something cavernous, something that used to be a home. And she, a girl of 9 or 10, is whisked away. Sitting on the stretcher, dazed and bloodied, she looks off to the side. She appears to be searching. The men who carry the stretcher move with urgency, as if the doing of care, of gentleness, can undo what has happened to this girl, to this place, to the bodies yet to be dug from beneath the rubble. Someone nearby asks God for revenge. Perhaps God is here somewhere, also searching. A soldier I met years ago who made the study of industrial violence his hobby once told me the first thing that kills when a bomb goes off isn't shrapnel or fire. It's the overpressure wave, air forced violently outward from the site of the blast. What you're supposed to do, he said, is drop to the ground and cover your ears. Breathe out. Empty your lungs before the air collides with and flattens them. Of course, if you're close enough, nothing you do or don't do will make any difference at all. He said the force of the overpressure wave weakens in proportion to the cube of the distance from the site of impact, which is to say, the most effective thing you can do to avoid getting killed by a missile or a mine or a grenade is to be far away when it goes off. How do you do that? I asked. Do what? Know when a thing like that is about to happen. Know to be far away. Well, he said, and trailed off. A few minutes later, he was telling the story of a freak accident his daughter had suffered as a toddler, how carrying her to the emergency room was the scariest thing he'd ever experienced. Even in his line of work, even with all he'd seen, the scariest thing. As the men carry the girl out of what used to be her home, she asks if they're going to take her to the cemetery. One of the men says, "Masha'Allah, Masha'Allah." In literal translation, the word means what God wills. A closer approximation of one meaning, is something like, what has happened is what God willed. But English, tasked with a word like this, turns stiff and monophonic, and Masha'Allah is orchestral. To any ear that grew up on this language, it is clear that what the man means when he says this word is something else entirely. Something instantly familiar to generations who've heard it spilling out the mouths of beaming grandmothers at the end of piano recitals and graduation ceremonies and at the first sight of a newborn. Used this way, it finds its principal purpose as an expression of joy. Look at this wonderful thing God has done. MashaAllah. Language, too, forces the air from the lungs. Thank you so much.
Hi, this is an extraordinary and extremely intimidating room to be in, and with each reader I've become more and more intimidated. My name is Katie Kittimura. I'm reading from a novel called Audition. In the case of this production, I had every reason to hope for the best. Not only was I working with Anne, but the play had been written by a playwright I had long admired. She was a young writer, exceptionally brilliant. I had seen an early production of hers at a small theater downtown that seated no more than 80 people. The theater was half empty the night I went, but even in a half-empty theater, with a cast of unknowns, I knew that she was an extraordinary talent. Tension grew out of every scene, scenes in which nothing took place, and people said very little, and yet the pressure grew and grew, so that by the end of the play, I realized I'd been in a sickening state of unease for some time, and when I emerged from the theater, I was simultaneously invigorated and physically exhausted, every nerve in my body still standing on end. Of course, I immediately called my agent and asked her to arrange a meeting, and not too long after that, I spoke to Anne, who had also seen the young playwright's work and been similarly impressed. However, everyone had been by then, so it was by no means assured that we would have the opportunity to work with her, much less that she would make a new piece with us. But as it turned out, after nearly 2 years of expressions of intent and little more, she suddenly called me and said she had something. When she sent me the play, I knew from the first page that this was a part for me, the one that came along only very rarely, and that if I was patient and careful, it could form the basis of the best work I had ever done. But then, after the first table read, and after the early rehearsals and the later rehearsals, and even as Anne and the playwright herself extolled the virtues of my interpretation, even as the pieces began to fall into place and the shape of the performances began to emerge, and even as I began to see, in the not-too-distant future, the point at which the emergence would cease and the structure of the work begin to ossify, even then, I had the sense that I was still too much clinging to the shore. The world of it, continued to elude me, and I knew that the window of opportunity was closing, that I had to make some shift within myself, or the role would slip away. Thank you.
In late March, I was returning from a spring skiing trip and had a couple of hours to kill at Chicago O'Hare Airport. Nothing in that cavernous place looked nearly as inviting as an open bar stool at a burger joint in front of a March Madness men's basketball game. I dropped my bag under the bar and sat down to watch. Next to me was a woman wearing a maroon Mississippi State baseball cap with a blonde ponytail pulled out the back. She had a beer and half a hamburger on the bar and didn't seem to care that some of her fellow patrons might not appreciate her screaming at the TV in the middle of the afternoon. The second half had just started and Mississippi State had a commanding lead over Xavier, the tournament's Cinderella story. We exchanged a few words during commercial breaks, but I'd spent most of the 1990s in Kentucky and knew enough about rabid college basketball fans to know I should keep my trap shut while the game was on. Keeping mum, I watched as Mississippi State collapsed. When the buzzer sounded, the woman with the ponytail groaned audibly, ordered another beer, and turned a rueful smile on me. She told me her first name and that she was a pharmaceutical sales rep for Janssen, Johnson & Johnson's biggest drug unit. I laughed and told her that I was a drug reporter for the New York Times. She made a face, and I shrugged. "You should probably leave right now," I said. "I was here first," she blurted and gave a terrific laugh. We spoke about our lives and families in ways you only do with a stranger you're all but certain never to see again. And then she told me a story that would drive my reporting for years. She said her sister had a 10-year-old son who a year earlier had gotten into a fight on a school playground. The principal insisted the boy see a shrink. My barmate's job was selling Risperdal, a drug used to treat schizophrenia, so she offered to get her nephew an immediate appointment with one of her favorite psychiatrists, a specialist who would otherwise require months to see. Her sister gratefully accepted. Convinced her nephew was perfectly normal, she expected the psychiatrist would admonish him not to fight again and then send him on his way. Instead, the doctor provided her sister with free samples of Risperdal, samples she herself had dropped off just days before. My barmate was shocked and told her sister to think a minute before giving him that medicine, but it was too late. Over the next year, her nephew gained 25 pounds and, embarrassed about his size, stopped visiting the neighborhood pool with his favorite aunt. My barmate tried without success to persuade her sister to stop the medication. Her brother-in-law, who didn't want the boy on Risperdal either, stopped speaking to her. Around that time, word got out that the FDA would soon demand that every drug in Risperdal's class of medicines carry warnings noting that they could cause diabetes and other metabolic problems. Insisting this wasn't true, Johnson & Johnson provided her with talking points to reassure doctors that Risperdal, unlike competing pills, didn't increase the risks of diabetes. Watching her nephew, she knew those reassurances were false. 3 weeks after our meeting, the FDA sent the company a warning letter stating that its claims about Risperdal and diabetes were false. A few months later, the company sent doctors across the country admitting that it had made a mistake minimizing the risks of diabetes and made misleading claims that Risperdal was safer than similar drugs, confessions that came too late for many. Before her nephew became one of the psychiatrist's patients, she was thrilled that his Risperdal prescription numbers continued to climb and loved that his drug sample closet needed frequent restocking. He was one of her whales, a term drug sales reps used to describe doctors whose many prescriptions fund their bonuses. She'd showered him with gifts as recompense. J&J had paid him to give frequent marketing talks about Risperdal to other doctors, allowing him to build a robust referral network. Now the psychiatrist's numbers made her sick, and she had a hard time even looking at him. In fact, since Risperdal wasn't approved by federal drug authorities for use in children, she'd been vaguely aware that parts of her job were a bit shady, including pitching Risperdal to child psychiatrists, dropping off drug samples to their offices, and paying these psychiatrists to tell other doctors how to prescribe Risperdal to children. But it hadn't not been approved, so Now she suspected what she'd been doing was just plain wrong and told me she was about to quit. I asked for her last name and phone number and told her that once she left J&J, she'd be the perfect source for a story about all this. She shook her head. "Can't do that," she said in a southern drawl that had gotten thicker with her second beer. "I'm only talking to you now because I'm stuck in this dang airport, drank 2 beers, and the Bulldogs, God bless them, freaking lost. Seeded number 2, and they lost." I sighed. "First of all, let's be clear about one thing," I said. "The Bulldogs didn't just lose. They got crushed. Had to be some kind of historic collapse. I mean, mother of God, just painful to watch." We both started laughing. I was never good at keeping a straight face when the moment demanded it. "Oh, Lordy," she said and breathed deeply, "and you think I'm going to talk to you now?" I slid my business card across the bar. "Look," I said, "you know this is an important story. How many other kids are out there just like your nephew? I can't do this unless folks like you agree to talk." Shaking that blonde ponytail from side to side, she got up, gathered her luggage. She left my card untouched on the bar. "Take care of yourself, Mr. New York Times." I never saw or heard from her again.
Our next group of readers will be Beth Macy, Amanda Vale, Joanna Pocock, Scott Anderson, and Lucas Schaefer.
Hello. I'm Beth Macy, super honored to be here. And I'm going to read from a chapter near the end of my memoir, Paper Girl, a memoir of home and family in a fractured America. And it's a finalist in the autobiography category. My boyfriend from college was a deadhead and a news reporter, the most liberal person I knew. But when we met up 38 years later, he told me he spent 4 to 7 hours a day consuming Russian-sponsored news on YouTube. In mid-February 2023, Bill, a hardcore smoker who carried a canister of loose nicotine and rolling papers with him wherever he went, came down with a serious case of pneumonia. He had told me earlier, "At this point, I'm thinking, if something gets me, it gets me." He called the Affordable Care Act nothing but a fraud on regular-ass people and added, "If I just keel over at 76, I'll be good." But lacking health insurance, Bill went to the hospital later than he probably should have for his pneumonia and died a few days later of heart failure. His obituary noted that he, quote, loved to immerse himself in the world of fantasy, and that he dedicated his waking hours working towards bettering the city of Springfield, Ohio, and helping the homeless. In an interview with News Nation, Bill had blamed the city's rise in homelessness squarely on Springfield's Haitians, whose presence he believed was the main cause of rising house costs. And you all remember when they said the Haitians, they're eating the pets, they're eating the cats. He was the leader of that group. On X, he promoted racist and anti-Semitic screeds, including a documentary claiming that immigrants were invited into the country at the behest of Jewish moguls eager to erase white America as payback for the Jewish suffering in World War II. In Bill's mind, the Haitian influx was unscrupulously designed to provide cheap labor for corporations to make up for the, quote, unreliable, worthless drug addicts who refused to go to work. Bill had spent his final months fully ensconced in the debunked white nationalist Great Replacement theory, supporting such notions that the Jewish Sackler family developed OxyContin with the intent of killing off whites, and that the Biden administration and that the Biden administration's Jewish members led the way on getting temporary protected status for Haitians for similar reasons. The day of Bill's funeral, the Trump administration announced that it was halting TPS for Haitians, including most of the roughly 15,000 living in Springfield. Bill died at 63. Months later, his daughter told me, the internet killed my dad. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amanda Vale, and I will be reading to you from Pride and Pleasure, the Schuyler Sisters in an Age of Resolution, a finalist for Biography. I'm really honored to be here, and congratulations to all of us for being here as well. June 1, 1781. Angelica kisses her husband goodbye and sets off for Albany with little Philip and his baby sister Kitty. The French army is leaving Newport, so Angelica will be staying in Albany at least until her confinement, while her husband travels with Rochambeau to Dobbs Ferry to rendezvous with Washington and his forces. Her father, Philip Schuyler, had been planning to come fetch her and the children himself, but he's been suffering from the quinsy and couldn't make the journey. Instead, he sent his coachman, Lewis, with a luxuriously sprung Schuyler carriage. Because in Angelica's condition, the trip will be tiring. She's well into her 5th month of pregnancy, when probably all she wants to do is sleep, not jounce along a rutted road with 2 children under the age of 4, even if their nursemaid accompanies them. Arriving in Albany on the 7th, she's delighted to be enfolded in her family's embrace. For all her headstrong qualities, she loves both her parents dearly, and her joy is increased when, toward the end of the month, Eliza and Hamilton join the party. But it seems as if their reunion may be short-lived. Hamilton is still pining for a field command in the army, and now that he's brought Eliza safely to her parents' house, he says, he plans to go to Washington's headquarters and stay until he's persuaded the general to give him the post he wants. The French and Americans are contemplating an attack on New York that might well strike the decisive blow in this war, and it may be Hamilton's last chance to get in on the fight. Angelica, for whom the glittering prizes of fame never seem to lose their luster, applauds Hamilton's enterprise immediately. She is, as she puts it, very anxious for your happiness and glory. But Eliza is bitterly and tearfully opposed. It's all very well for Angelica to be supportive. Her husband won't be exposed to enemy fire. It's useless for Hamilton to protest that since there's a little prospect of activity, there won't be any danger, or to claim that it costs me a great deal to be absent from the delights of their marriage bed, or to swear that only her love makes life of any value to me. She is completely overcome with grief at the prospect of parting with him. Except for his short trip to Newport in March, they have been together most of every day and every night of their brief marriage, and she's desolate when she imagines that they might never be together again. Why doesn't she play the most powerful card in her possession and tell him that she suspects she's pregnant? Perhaps she isn't sure, or fears that things will go awry, as she knows they sometimes do, or perhaps she doesn't want to force him to make a choice that will be hurtful to her, more hurtful than his leaving in ignorance would be. So she says nothing. And so, in the first week of July, Hamilton mounts the new horse that Philip Schuyler has given him, murmurs, "Be as happy as you can, my beloved wife," into Eliza's ear, and rides south to Dobbs Ferry. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Joanna Pocock, and I just got in from London last night, so it's all a bit like a dream. I'm reading from Greyhound, which is in the criticism category, and I'm going to read the opening, which is quite gentle, and it's a gentle opening to a book that, like all road trips, gets a lot less gentle as it goes. Traveling on a Greyhound bus, you can disappear. The day hadn't yet begun as we pulled out of Detroit. We were heading to St. Louis through lashing rain under a black sky. The only sounds were the regular swish of windshield wipers and the rhythmic sucking of rubber tires on wet tarmac. It was too early for conversation. The people around me seemed weary. Some looked like they hadn't slept in days. Others had come prepared with pillows, eye masks, and blankets. The woman next to me appeared lost in her thoughts. No phone, no book, she was just sitting. I could sense she was working something out in her mind. The reading lights didn't work, and I nodded off. When I woke from a light sleep, I could just make out the skeletons of electricity pylons and the sprawling bodies of industrial buildings through the large, foggy window. Every now and then, the bright lights of gas stations and truck stops veered into view, signaling food, rest, a break from the gray monotony of the highway. It was March 2023, and I was on a Greyhound bus, retracing a 2,300-mile journey from Detroit to Los Angeles, a trip I had taken in 2006. As a non-driver, my only options for crossing the continent solo consist of hitchhiking, taking a train, or taking a bus. For several years, I'd felt a pull to remake this journey, to revisit the motels, diners, highways, parking lots, towns, cities, suburbs, and truck stops. I was curious to see how the places I had traveled through in 2006 had changed, while simultaneously catching a glimpse of the person I had been then, a ragged person running away from loss. Marc Auger, the late French anthropologist, sees these revisited places of memory as opportunities to face the image of what we are no longer. A place can often a palimpsest of one's past and present, the superimposition of our current selves onto the memories we have of a place allow us to be, in Auger's words, tourists of the private. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Scott Anderson. It's a great and unexpected honor to be here. The section I'm going to be reading from my book is largely drawn from an interview with Farah Pahlavi, who was the former queen of Iran. I think the only word I probably should explain is Muharram, which is a holy month in Shia Islam. It's towards the end of our calendar year. What Farah Pahlavi remembers most vividly about the month of Muharram in 1978 was the chants at night. They usually began just after the evening prayer or with the onset of curfew, when the first of what would rapidly grow to tens of thousands of Tehranis took to their rooftops to praise God and Khomeini, to call for the death of the king. Hour after hour it went on, overwhelming all other sounds of the city except for the occasional crackle of gunfire from somewhere in the darkness. The Queen was told that many of the chants and gunshots were tape recordings that the opposition was replaying endlessly over loudspeakers, but that didn't make things any easier. Even in the palace, she recalled, it was impossible to block out the sound. Especially difficult was trying to explain away the calls of death to the Shah to her two youngest children, Ali Reza and Layla, then 12 and 8. That these were the same two children who would subsequently commit suicide appeared to touch a nerve. It frightened the little ones, Pahlavi said tightly. Naturally, it frightened them. Desperate to escape the confines of Niavaran, a few days before Christmas, the Shah and Shah Banu took their family skiing in the nearby Elburz Mountains. The outing was going well until one of the children spotted "Death to the Shah" graffiti splashed along a retaining wall. That same evening, the parents decided to send the 3 children still in Iran onto the United States to join their eldest brother. But in December 1978, it wasn't only the world beyond the palace that was turning on the royal family. One day, the Queen noticed with a start that one of her favorite secretaries, a woman who had been with her for many years, had abruptly taken to wearing a religious headscarf. She had never worn one before, the Queen said, but of course I couldn't say anything. The shift was especially noticeable among the lower-level household staff, the maids and gardeners, the drivers and waiters. Almost by the day, they appeared to grow a little less attentive, a little more distant, to even display a trace of insolence at times. The thought crossed Pahlavi's mind that the crisis in the kingdom might end in wholly unexpected fashion, not with a military crackdown or a revolutionary takeover, but by the hand of someone, a gardener, a butler, within the walls of Niavaran itself. Gazing out a palace window one evening and listening as the nightly chants grew, she thought to herself, "They're going to kill us." Although she couldn't explain why, she found this thought strangely calming. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lucas Schaefer. It's a great honor to be here. I'm going to be reading from my novel. Oh, it's there, the slip. The morning after Ed Hooley saw a coyote in the supply closet, Bob Alexander declared something smelled rotten inside Terry Tucker's boxing gym. This was at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday, midway through abs and stretching. Inside the ring, the 11 members of the First Thing crew sprawled out on foam mats as Terry Tucker, 54, led them through an arduous medley of scissor kicks and side-to-sides, knees to your ears, and upside-down bicycle. It was August in Austin. The average age inside the ring was 49, and though it would be hours before a single speck of perspiration would appear on Terry's left temple, his charges were sopping. Sopping except for Bob Alexander. Bob was lanky and spry, a semi-affable curmudgeon. At 68, he was the oldest of the First Thingers and among the fittest, too, though on this morning he was only going through the motions. Preoccupying Bob was the anonymous note that had been placed under the windshield wiper of his Audi sometime the night before. It had been a decade since his nephew had disappeared, and things like this still happened on occasion. A lead to nowhere, a tip to nothing, a psychic in New Braunfels who'd experienced a vision. Sounds promising, Bob had told the detective who'd called with that gem. A few days before, a short article about the anniversary of the disappearance had run in the Statesman, so of course the kooks and grifters were coming out of the woodwork now. No one had ever shown up at his house before, though, and it was this, combined with the note's puzzling content, which meant that as soon as Bob left the gym, he would take the folded paper, stowed in his glove compartment, to Austin Police Headquarters, a time suck in building form, where, if he had to guess, he'd rehash the story of his missing nephew, Nathaniel Rothstein, without coming any closer to finding him. Bob had never figured out how to talk about it all. It was strange to lose a nephew. Lose a son, well, that's awful, a tragedy. But a nephew? Who even liked their nephew? Nephews were always conspiring against patriarchs, trying to kill the king. And why shouldn't they? Uncles were worse. Bob liked to joke it was amazing he was never a suspect, given the reputation of that breed. You want to end pedophilia? Bob had told the Statesman reporter. Ban uncles. That is off the record and he's kidding, Bob's wife Marlene had been quick to add. He's a professor, she'd said by way of explanation. That's why he's so voluble. I'm more voluble than a professor, said Bob, recently retired. Professor Emeritus. Thank you.
Our next group of readers will be Quinn Slobodian, Mayuk Sen, Yuki Tanaka, Barbara Demick, and Karen Russell.
Thanks, everybody. A tremendous honor to be here. Moments of global economic crisis allow for the breakthrough of eccentric and, for some, exhilaratingly novel forms of politics. But they don't appear from nowhere. They have their own intellectual lineages and material preconditions. We can't understand the peculiar hybrids of extreme market ideology, far-right authoritarianism, and social conservatism without familiarizing ourselves first with the often tangled genealogies traced in this book. Well-funded networks of think tanks, conferences, gatherings, and workshops, as well as investment forums, comment sections, and Reddit groups, offer nurseries for new adaptive ideological strains. What was once the world of niche magazines and newsletters has grown over time to news aggregator websites, blogs, video streams, and social media feeds. TikTok and WhatsApp are to Javier Milei what the radio was to FDR or to Getulio Vargas in Brazil in the 1930s, writes the historian Ernesto Saman, a way to connect directly with voters. Common across the platforms and decades is a will to startle in an atmosphere of competitive speculation about the events of the near future. These are attention plays in an economy where attention is a scarce resource. Their strategy is to hit the same notes with the sledgehammer, the ones their consumers and readers expect to hear. The crisis is around the corner, the crash is coming, the status quo is doomed, all assumptions must be undone, taboos must shatter, the unspoken said aloud. Your liberty is at risk, act now and act quickly, the centralizers are coming, the socialists are coming, the refugees are coming, the gold requisitioners are coming, the authorities are coming, the state is coming, even if we are the state. As the New York Times synopsis of a bestseller written by one right-wing libertarian read, buy gold, silver, Swiss francs, and a gun. The alarmism is entrepreneurial. Newsletter subscriptions cost money, as do weekend seminars and conferences. The klaxon is a pitch. New fusionists are what libertarians began to call, in the 1970s, ideological entrepreneurs. Praising the category in 1977, Murray Rothbard wrote that it was, quote, the task of the entrepreneur to be able to understand current conditions and to project the proper tactics for the near future. By definition, they are speculators, fiction writers for a possible unfolding of events that cannot be guaranteed, but through writing and speaking, one can make more or less likely. The economist James Buchanan has described interest in forms of collective life as a rational economic calculation. We devote, on average, little energy towards understanding ballot measures and local elections because we are aware of the tiny power of our ballot and the broader outcome. Precisely the same logic, he wrote, may be extended to the emotional investment in the totality of any collective enterprise. Any sense of effective participation is attenuated as numbers increase, and any assessment of collective action as self-selected is also lost. The larger the polity, in the other words, the less likely the investment will be worth it. Identity to him was literally the investment of assets, in this case, of one's emotions. One argument of this book is that we can think about the far right in terms of an investment strategy in a world of unequally distributed assets. It's an investment strategy not only in the sense that it appeals to people's material self-interest, but also that it offers ways to manage an unknowable future. It offers the prospect of secure assets in a time of uncertainty. A term from the pages of the financial press can be helpful. In times of crisis, investors often make what is called a, quote, flight to safety or a flight to quality. They seek assets or commodities which are assumed to hold their value, even at the risk of lower short-term yields. Classic examples would be capital leaving emerging markets or newer companies for US Treasury bills or gold out of stocks and into bonds. Such a move doesn't mean a withdrawal from the market, but rather what would be called in the jargon, quote, a rebalancing of one's portfolio, changing the allocation of investments to decrease risk in a time of volatility. It's a shift in strategy, not a liquidation. That safety has been defined in different terms. In this book, we've read about the safety of racial homogeneity, not only as a shared psychological or emotional space, but also as one open to quantification. The return of IQ racism can be explained by the desire to have a reliable benchmark of value comparable to stock valuation. We can also see the flight to safety in the much more standard form as the investment preference for the shiny yellow metal of gold. In one of the starker cases of the interweaving of symbolic and financial threads of right-wing libertarian ideology, gold for the last half-century has been the nexus of an alternative morality built on a claim that society and market have been debauched or debased, to use their own terminology, by the last half-century of US-led financial capitalism. The era of quantitative easing that followed from 2008 until 2022 was a historically unique time. New laws of physics in the world economy seemed to be emerging. No matter how far down central banks pushed their interest rates, nothing resembled inflation seemed to arise. Old preconceptions seemed destined for the dustbins of history. New ideas on the left about modern monetary theory proposed that the laws had always been misunderstood. Maybe governments could indeed print as much money as they liked. It seemed especially true for the United States, which remained the issuer of the world's global reserve currency. For the hard-right libertarians at the core of this book, this was a time when a flight to the safety of white skin, yellow gold, and hardwired human nature seemed like the refuge that they needed. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mayuk Sen. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I am a finalist in the biography category, improbably, for my book Love Queenie, Merle Oberon, Hollywood's first South Asian star. So I'm just going to read a little portion from the introduction. I'll try to keep it under 3 minutes. So here we go. She was unlike any star I'd ever seen. It wasn't only her look, resembling no Crawford, Davis, or Garbo I recognized from that era. The inkjet hair, the charmingly crooked snaggletooth that would jut out whenever she smiled, the bronze skin that reminded me of my own. It was her voice. She spoke clipped and practiced English that on occasion would slip, revealing a hint of the city that had made her. I knew that accent well. It was the same I'd heard among my father's Bengali family from Kolkata, the city where she'd grown up. This connection made my response to her feel more real, more true, than any I'd felt toward other performers from that period. I was a teenager when I first came across Merle Oberon as Kathy in William Wyler's Wuthering Heights, the film for which she is arguably most remembered today. It was around 2009 or so, and I was a senior in high school in suburban New Jersey. By that point, she'd been dead for 3 decades, but I felt bound to her by city and skin. I knew the broad contours of her biography, that she had been born into poverty as a mixed-race Anglo-Indian girl in British India in the early 20th century, that upon immigrating to London as a teenager, she ditched the name Queenie Thompson and, within a matter of years, reinvented herself as Merle Oberon, becoming a star of Anglo-American cinema under that name, that she concealed her maternal South Asian lineage and passed as white because the prejudices of the era demanded she do so, maintaining until her 1979 death the studio-constructed fiction that she'd been born to European parents in Tasmania, Australia. As a teenager, I had enormous empathy for Merle Oberon's struggle. Most gay boys I knew tended to fawn over other divas of the era, but my chosen idol was Merle. I understood as a teen who was still coming to terms with his sexuality what it meant to hide a part of yourself for your safety, to secure a life where you might want to make your dreams possible. Her ascent was also meaningful to me as a South Asian, for Merle found purchase in a world where our likes were rarely acknowledged. That alone made her so much more than her tragedy. I knew even then that projecting a performer's off-screen biography onto their on-screen work was a simplistic way to read art. But when I saw Merle on screen, I saw the hurt in her gaze. I also felt an admiration for her survival, a disbelief that she could summon the will to make art despite her pain. I vowed that one day, if the tools were available to me and the public interest was sufficient, I would write a book on her life. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Yuki Tanaka. I'm reading one poem from my book called Chronicle of Drifting. And the poem is in part based on the life of my grandfather, who came back from the Second World War. Death in parentheses. He came home with his right leg made a bit shorter, but they didn't notice. A landmine did it, he said to himself, and I was the only one who heard him, because I followed him everywhere like a son. He hobbled when no one was looking, and I hobbled behind him. When he plucked an iris, I plucked the one next to it, and we thought of purple evening clouds. When he killed a butterfly, he'll take off the wings first, then crush it with his fingers and smell it. I tried to catch one, but it flitted away. He wanted to build a huge power plant to keep us from disappearing. I nodded and pointed out all the recent deaths, how quick they were. Tomatoes not as plump as they used to be. The maple trees discolored, their branches like veins with no fat around them. All this, he decided, meant we needed new things. But I disagreed on this. Why new? Why not old me? I who have lived here for many years, even before he was born. But he didn't listen. Mosquitoes come and go, full and happy. Outside the window, the plant looms over the village. It looks prettier than I thought, which makes me want to kiss it. But I know it will burn my lips, and I won't be able to speak to anyone with my charred mouth. I saw him dressed up for a meeting, and they shouted, blaming him for his empty head, for wanting too much. The next time I saw him, he was in bed, old and delirious. He opened his eyes and held my hand for the first time and said, "Don't push yourself, come back alive." He was buried in his ever-vanishing land, and I flew off into my friendless life. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me here. Thank you for listening. I'm Barbara Demick. The book is Daughters of the Bamboo Grove. It's set mostly in China. I think that's going to be difficult for the interpreter, but bear with me. I have two short excerpts. Here's the first. Here I am in Hunan province talking to a Chinese mother whose 2-year-old daughter, an identical twin, was taken away by Chinese government officials as punishment for the family's violations of the one-child policy. We're sitting on plastic stools in a bamboo grove, and the mother, her name is Zanhua, is sitting together with the twin who remains with her, whose name is Shuangjie, which means double purity. She was named that because she's a twin, identical twin. So this is Zanhua speaking. Shuangjie, she told me, pointing to the little girl draped on her lap. She always asks me, "When are you going to get my sister back?" The little girl, who is shyly clutching the hem of her mother's trousers, looked up and with some prodding finally spoke up in a squeaky little voice. "She would be the same age as me. It would be fun. We could play together. We could wear the same clothes and go to school together," she said. Zanhua replies, "Yes, it would be better. Twins shouldn't be separated. If it was possible, we want to take her back. I gave birth to her. I still want her. I at least want to know where she is. I don't know which country she's in. She could have been trafficked for her organs." Zanhua's voice trails off. I don't know if she still exists. By the time we finished speaking, the sun was low enough that we sat in the shadows of the bamboo, crisscrossing the landscape like bars of a prison. We couldn't stay much longer, as it would be hard to navigate out of the village in darkness. We started organizing our bags and notebooks and making our excuses to leave, and Zanhua thanked us politely for our visit. "Come back again, and next time bring my daughter," she told me. I think you've probably figured this out already, smart readers or non-readers. The stolen twin was sold for international adoption, and after this interview, I located her in Texas, and much later brought her back to the village. And this passage explains how Chinese officials falsified paperwork for this girl and many others, not everybody, but for many, to make it look like they had been abandoned. In order to make the babies legally adoptable, they had to be transformed into orphans. These were entirely new backstories spun out of the imagination of some bureaucrat. Somebody, often a friend or relative of an orphanage employee, had found this baby in a basket, or maybe in a box wrapped in a blanket. It would be at a market, the side of a road, a factory, at some plausible location. The fictions were often accompanied by falsified police reports. The lies would be recorded in the orphanage ledgers. When overseas parents adopted, the lies would be repeated in the paperwork they were given. Eventually, the adoptees would be old enough to read the documents themselves as they tried to make sense of their personal histories. In adult life, these young women, now mostly in their 20s and 30s, would struggle to figure out what had happened to them. Where did I come from? How did I get here? Who am I really?
Wow, what a long walk. Hi, everybody. Thank you all, and what amazing readings. It's an honor and it's a great joy to be here. I'm Karen Russell. I'm reading from my novel, The Antidote, for which my body has, for some reason, flooded me with the adrenaline you'd need to do parkour. So I don't know where the dial is. Just going to take a breath and try to read at an intelligible speed. It's from my novel, The Antidote. Just reading several paragraphs, not fighting off a bear, as my body seems to believe. The land here is so flat that it's easy to lose your bearings. When the sun begins to sink, even veteran plainsmen consult their compasses. I've heard that it feels like being lost at sea. I have never seen the ocean, but I do know what it means to live without landmarks. That Sunday, before any of us knew to call it Black Sunday, I turned to find the road. When I looked to the southeast, I saw a thin black bar floating midair. This was not such an unusual sight. The dust played tricks on our eyes. A city might seem to ripple into focus and collapse again. This had happened even before the drought. My uncle once took me to see the mirage flats in the sandhills, where the reddish light in the grassy dunes cast up all sorts of illusions in people's minds. One of them, said my uncle, was that this sandy place could be profitably farmed. At the Grange, an entire wall is decorated with antique illusions, posters that sell the plains as an American Eden. Wheat piles up like gold in southern Nebraska. Rain follows the plow. Staring out at the thirsty prairie made me feel lonely and important. The country needed me. It needed my teammates, the warriors who played ball in Region 7 of the Western Plains High School Girls Basketball Division. Our team name, unfortunately, had come from our sponsor, Uz Poultry and Eggs. I was the starting point guard for Poultry and Eggs, owing to my natural playmaking skills and also because I had nothing to do but practice. Other girls had homes to which they longed to return, water to pump and chickens to feed, mothers to chide them and to kiss them,
fathers to scream at them to haul ass, seemingly thousands of drooling babies to burp and diaper and bounce to sleep. Love wore them out. I had nothing to burn off my anger but basketball. I needed rivals to wring it out of me. Game day was the greatest release, the one day of the week when I felt anything like peace. Coach told me what to do, and the scoreboard told me what to feel. My feet left the ground, the ball left my fingers, and I could tell in a heartbeat whether I'd made the shot. Into and through, I played under the moon, straight through the summer months, when every other girl my age was helping with harvest. My uncle did not expect help to come from me. He'd given up on asking me to do much of anything, although he often left his bedroom door open so that I could hear him praying loudly for my salvation. There was no one to stop me from doing whatever the hell I wanted. My mother was dying a second time, fraying and fading inside me. The earth was attacking us from the sky, and the only consolation I still believed in was that all weather is temporary. Weather can change in an instant. Thank you.
Okay, we have one reader in this next group that we have not heard from, and I'm just going to ask if she is here. Lisa Hoffman-Kuroda. Okay. In that case, our next group of readers will be Alex Green, Ricky Laurentis, and Liz Pelly.
Good evening. It's an honor to be here. My name's Alex Green. I'm a body double for Lucas Schaefer and the author of A Perfect Turmoil, Walter E. Fernald, and the Struggle for America's Disabled. I'm just going to read a bit from the introduction here because the figure in my book is somewhat unknown. At the time of his death in 1924, Dr. Walter E. Fernald was recognized as the world's foremost leader on intellectual and developmental disabilities. During his 37 years at the head of his institution, he led a wholesale change of American conceptions about the roles and responsibilities a society has and should have relative to its disabled people. In so doing, he fundamentally reshaped the ways that doctors treat their patients, the methods public schools use to educate their students, the role governments have in the lives of their citizens, and even the very taunts and prejudices that children and adults throw at one another in casual speech today. To call him solely a doctor would impose interpretive boundaries that are far too restrictive. Fernald was a master of policy and politics, a visionary educator, a model for honest scientific inquiry, a champion of women's rights, a master propagandist, a moralist prude, and a vicious conjurer of dangerously false ideas about the biological roots of delinquency, crime, and human behavior. He single-handedly did battle against some of the most disturbing forms of hate in American history, and also perpetrated grave injustices himself. On any given day, Fernald played host to mayors and governors. Delegations visited him from Japan, Australia, France, Italy, China, and England. He shaped laws for states and nations. He was a founding faculty member of the Harvard Graduate School of Education and created the basis for special education as we know it today. Countless teachers were trained in his classrooms while thousands of disabled children were educated there in the process. In his own time, Fernald struggled to make sense of the extraordinary scope of what he had taken on. Were the people entrusted to his care patients, pupils, or inmates? Was it a school, a hospital, a research center, a farm, a village, a utopia, or a prison? His story matters because of this struggle, because he sought to understand the meaning and consequences of his actions in ways that provide an invaluable glimpse of one human being's reckoning with ethics, power, and social responsibility. What it means to be an American was, for Walter Fernald, a question of what it means to offer care and support to others. He believed that America's adherence to its most fundamental values could be found by seeing how we treat those who need the richness of community and human connection the most. But he was also aware of the unshakable power of myth. And he accepted the existence of the most ablest one of them all. The myth that an individual's value in society could be measured in labor and efficiency. The belief that the ability to work was a precondition for the right to access the American dream. The widespread acceptance of this myth, in the present as much as in the past, is at the root of America's long-standing mistreatment of disabled people. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Ricky Laurentis. Thank you. Thank you to the interpreters, and I'm honored to be here. I'm going to read two poems. The first one is called Beautiful Bottom, Beautiful Shame. The way he writhed beneath the other men argued his loneliness, but he wasn't just a blank measure waiting to sound. However much an O his mouth made, he wasn't just an O, thrusting back up against what is almost like a finger, though it isn't, always needing to be touched like a finger, to be held. I'm lonely. My waist cinched inward like some vintage Japanese fan, the clever blade of my back working inch by inch toward a pleasure half mine, the way fire pleases, wax pleases. What does possession mean? No, really, tell me. That at this moment, someone beside myself can feel how many times I shudder. Asked if I like it. I like it. I speak out those 3 syllables, mess myself. The point is, I think, to empty. It feels good. To be 2 men, no, 2 bodies interlocked in a sentence still forming. We dance the dance that says, I want you. Come closer, come in me. No, really, he said as a whisper, boy, you want to be possessed. Because you see, he'd been removed from his body then, per usual. His beauty like a talisman offered, his woundedness revealed. And my last poem has a title that in the 90s when I grew up, I remember it being an insult, so it seemed important to reclaim it. And it's called Hermaphrodite or Sacred Paean. All eyes on earth be urgently attracted to that hermaphroditic form I longed for having. I have it, an Egyptian happy. Derision won't change the body I swarm, nor scorn, nor more violence or lies can try me small. I ease around, quasi-quadroon of sexes, quick ball, tray black, confronted with these added eyes batted against the temple grace of my body, my breasts. Oh, am I a looked-at dignity, demanding yet song? That tight through space between seer and what seen might be sensations rise, or shame. Or is solicitation's chance, that calculus arguing gender, sans what petty nubile knowledge divides my thighs? Remember me, the god Phanes, who created cries. Use me, the god Hermaphrodite, who revises, replied, I am their audience. Honey, ain't nothing here subpar. Light breaks over all eyes like sound plays the guitar. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. This is a huge honor. My name is Liz Pelly. I'm the author of Mood Machine, The Rise of Spotify, and the Costs of the Perfect Playlist, which is a finalist for the John Leonard Prize for Best First Book. As Spotify leaned more heavily into machine learning and personalization, its concept of the perfect playlist was becoming clearer. It was not just about nailing the most universally beloved song for a given mood or moment, not just about running generalized A/B testing to find the next big global hit. It was about purportedly running personalized A/B tests on you. It was about running millions and millions of A/B tests, different ones for each user, constantly running studies on your listening habits. It was about data tuning what you were most likely to stream at a given moment. Personalization, driven by machine learning and algorithms, would aim to put the perfect in perfect playlist, each song data optimized for max user engagement. It was subtle but also huge. The product was becoming blatantly less about connecting users to the world of music and more about treating your own taste as a world of its own to be studied and sorted, packaged and sold. It wasn't necessarily selling you music recommendations. It was oftentimes selling your own music taste back to you in lots of different types of boxes. Of course, this was all done in the name of discovery, but over time, it became clear that discovery was code for keeping users streaming and keeping users in their comfort zones. In fact, by 2020, the language of discovery on the app was sidelined for the broader project of supplying playlists, quote, made for you. It was about behavior modification to serve a corporate bottom line. More time spent on the app meant a user was more likely to retain their account, and it also meant more data. How you responded to the occasional item seeded for discovery would help the app expand its taste profile on you. Hyper-personalization has championed a new orientation of listening, make the music revolve around me, that now pervades different layers of the Spotify product in different ways. This way of approaching algorithmic recommendation has ushered in a deeply alienated way of learning about music. You know what the machine thinks you like, but you don't always know why the machine came to that conclusion. You also don't know what the machine thinks other people like, or the ways in which what you are recommended relates to what other people are recommended. It's music recommendation as a means of creating silos, not connections. On streaming services, we hear simulacrums. We're made to believe we are listening to ourselves, but what's streaming is a warped reflection, where our desires are just some of the data that is refracted and served back in order to keep us streaming. We're listening to our slightly off data double. But at a certain point, a streaming listener may very well come to believe that what the machine suggests is indeed what they like. Not because it's true, but because they can see or feel no other option. Thanks.
All right, our last group of readers tonight will be Ashley D. Farmer, Henri Cole, Vanthea Bromley, Greg Grandin, and Angela Flournoy. I welcome all of you to the stage.
Good evening. Good evening. It's an honor to be here. I am Ashley Farmer, author of Queen Mother, Black Nationalism, Reparations, and the Untold Story of Audley Moore. If you haven't guessed, Moore was a Black nationalist, so I am going to read a section about how she comes to be that way. On a muggy summer evening in 1922, Audley Moore made her way to the Longshoremen's Hall on the corner of Jackson Avenue and Franklin Street. She expected the night air to be hot, but she was sweating even more than usual this evening because she was packing some heat of her own. She had a .45 caliber pistol in her bra and another in her purse. She also had a briefcase full of bullets at her side. If it was the fight the New Orleans police wanted, she was ready to give it to them. Audley rounded the corner and came upon a building that had served as a rallying and radicalizing space for decades. It was an iconic building, angular, white, and imposing, with darkly painted rectangular windows and wide double doors. But on this night, it stuck out for a different reason. A crowd had already gathered outside, domestic workers, store owners, homemakers, and longshoremen, who were all filing in to hear New Orleans' newest visitor deliver a speech. "He'll speak tonight, believe me, he'll speak tonight," Audley heard people mutter as she said her hellos. She nodded in agreement and made her way inside. The air in the hall felt as thick as it did outside. Everyone had heard what had happened the night before. Marcus Garvey had come to town. Afraid of his penchant for rousing black crowds, he had made a name for himself delivering speeches about the storied history of Africa and proclaiming the time had come for black people around the world to come together and fight white supremacy. The police blocked Marcus Garvey from speaking in an injunction against the meeting. His followers had contested the move, and word was they won. Audley hoped that the rumors were true. She watched nervously as the police came into the longshoremen's hall. They filed in down the center aisle and lined themselves up, each man a row of benches. Audley exchanged knowing looks with the others in the audience and shifted in her seat. Everyone was anxiously waiting to see who was going to make the first move, Garvey or the police. Cheers rang out as the black nationalist entered, walked down the center aisle, and took the stage. "My friends, I want to apologize to you for not speaking last night," he said. "But the mayor of New Orleans permitted himself to be used as a stooge by the chief of police," he said to Cheers. The police jumped up. They were poised to attack. Black New Orleanians, who had spent their lives in the Deep South and had bearing arms for self-defense since slavery, responded in kind. Like a wave, the guns went up. Audley joined, drawing her little pearled handgun from her pocketbook and a smaller one from inside her dress, and held them high in the air. "Speak, Garvey, speak. Speak, Garvey, speak," the crowd chanted in unison. And Audley watched in astonishment as the police filed out of there like little puppy dogs wagging their tails, she said. She stashed their guns and settled in to hear a speech that would transform her life. Or at least that's how Audley would always tell it, the mostly true story of her birth as a black nationalist. Thank you.
I am Henri Cole. That's my beautiful book cover. I'm going to read 2 sonnets. Guns. Stick in the mud, old fart. What are you doing to get the guns off the streets? I am not here to pick on anyone, but now that they have shot Yossi, who ground my meat in Hingham, and his shiny pink meat truck is for sale, I feel desolate. A gun is a vengeful machine exacting a price. A gun rejects stillness. It wants to get off. A man can be vain, almost like a god, but inside him is a carp biting the muck of a lake. A man who speaks too softly gets hit with a big stick and lopes along behind. A gun is minatory. Still, one day of kindness is greater. Run, hide, evacuate. Don't fire, duck, take cover. At Yossi's ceremony, his family put a gold cloth on his face. Self-reliant, autonomous, tough, he lay in a shroud of silk.
I was distressed to read this morning that at Boston University, the faculty has been commanded to remove all pride flags from its offices, office windows, office doors, etc. So I suppose this is my pride poem. I've written a lot of pride poems. This is a discrete pride poem called Ode to Hearing. It's true I speak too softly and overthink things, but golly gee, I love listening to him sing in the shower. The universe is chaotic. I don't need to hear this to believe it. So I'm immensely grateful when something that at first sounds like despair then isn't, because its very utterance is a victory. Like many taciturn people, I live alone. The barn owl, the rat, the moth, they see at night because of special rods in their eyes. But I must have special rods in my ears, because when he sings like that, it feels as if I am being brought into existence. And I never, never want to leave this world I so love. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Evanthea Bromley. I'm going to be reading my debut novel, Crown, for the Leonard Prize. Thank you, everyone, for sharing space in this room tonight. The woman stripped herself of the button-up shirt and the bra, lace gone vintage with washings, and leaned back against the door while he pushed the black skirt up and over the hard fin of her hip. Halogen spat streetlight lit the ink on her skin. The waitress uniform, all crumpled on the pickup floor. The black book stuffed with the evening's tips, and the strings wrapped around the book and set on the seat beside them. He stopped and looked at his hands on either side of her ribs and said, "Sorry, they're not dirty. It's just they get all stained with the work." I don't mind. Time went long and syrupy in the cab. Outside stood a single streetlight in the snow, as though this might be Narnia instead of a tenement building in a parking lot full of old broken cars and apartments full of young broken people. And the woman climbed and climbed and climbed until she hungered to throw herself from that cliff. Snow poured out of the streetlight. I'm going to come. Not yet. The two of them balanced together at the top of something just perfect, and then the man said, "Sometimes I can't get the oil out. It drives me crazy." Then she bit the space between his shoulder and his neck so hard that the next day there would be marks, and it was done. Afterward, the woman entered the apartment silently, slipped off her own shoes beside the two small pairs by the door, and stood absorbing the dreaming air of the place. I remember the two of them, daughter, son, on the couch that night, and I couldn't tell whose arm was whose, which leg. Turning off the television, I knelt beside them both and put a hand to each of their chests and let myself feel the breathing. Snow falling like feathers. Icarus, go gentle on my roof. And I should have known better. I should have been careful. But I didn't, I wasn't. And actually, there is no limit to how many times you can make the same mistake. Thank you.
My name is Greg Grandin, and it's humbling, to say the least, to come near the end of such a long wonderful evening of reading and full of work that is just wondrous, and it's just an honor to be part of it. Thank you. I'm going to read, I think I'll end with a murder, an unsolved murder. It's a set piece that acts as something of the climax of a book that's about 100 years, that covers 500 years of history, and it's shortly after World War II, and the person murdered was Jorge Gaitan, a Colombian politician who embodied a kind of ideal that the fight against fascism wasn't just to beat fascism, but to bring about a social democratic world, a world of equality, a world of dignity. And his death kind of captures the explosion of that and the opening up to a more horrible world. So at 1 p.m. on April 9th, 1948, the man thought to be Colombia's president-in-waiting, Jorge Gaitan, was shot to death on 7th Avenue, one of downtown Bogota's busiest streets. He was dressed neatly in a midnight blue suit. Gaitan had stepped out of his law office for lunch. He was standing in front of a popular nightclub, El Gato Negro, surrounded by several friends. A young man named Juan Roa Sierra, later said to be unstable, pushed through the lunchtime crowd and approached Gaitan from behind. As he stepped close to the circle of men, Roa raised a small nickel-plated pistol and fired 3 times, putting 1 bullet in Gaitan's head and 2 in his back. Gaitan's death was nearly instantaneous. The uprising that followed was so powerful, so violent, it can't but be read as a metaphor. All of the energy compressed in the years after World War II, all the passions and expectations had reached a combustion point, so intense that in retrospect it could be read as a preview of the Cold War horrors to come. The city exploded. Bootblacks used their shine boxes to beat Roa to death. By morning, most of Bogota had been reduced to ruin. The death took place at the founding of the Organization of American States in Bogota right at that moment. So everybody from the Americas, intellectuals and activists and politicians and writers were there. Garcia Marquez was there, a young journalist. Fidel Castro was there as a university student. Let me see where we go here. It was the shooter himself, Juan Roa Sierra, who first suggested conspiracy. After he emptied his revolver into Gaitan, a group of police officers grabbed the assassin and pulled him into a drugstore and shut the door. It was bedlam inside and out, but one officer asked Roa, "Por qué ha cometido este crimen?" Roa stayed silent. As the crowd pressed against the storefront windows, the officer asked again, "Why did you kill Gaitan?" This time, Roa answered. He paraphrased a book of esoterica that he had been reading. "Oh, sir," he said to the policeman, "there are powerful things that can't be spoken of." The officer asked again, "Who ordered you to kill?" Again, Roa said, "Some things are too powerful to name." Before he could say whether he was referring to earthly or astral power, the owner of the drugstore, hoping to save his windows, opened the door and the crowd rushed in, and Roa was dragged outside. Fidel Castro, who had an appointment to meet with Gaitan later in the afternoon, was having lunch on the same street when the killing took place. He and his friends ran out and joined the protests. Having commandeered a rifle from a local police station, Castro jumped up on a bench and tried to round up a group of soldiers to join in the protest. Everyone listened, he recalled in an interview, but no one did anything, and there I was with my rifle making my speech. Gabriel Garcia Marquez had heard about Gaitan's murder in his dorm room. He hurried to El Gato Negro in time to witness the bootblacks beating Roa to death. As he made his way through the crowd, the future magical realist was stunned by the speed with which accounts of witnesses were changing in form and substance until they lost all resemblance to reality. Everyone already had a different story as to who saw whom doing what. Now, Mario Vargas Llosa opens his novel, a Peruvian novelist, Conversations in the Cathedral, with the question, at what precise moment had Peru fucked itself up? Colombians ask themselves the same question, en que momento se jodió Colombia? And they have an answer, 1 p.m. on April 9th, 1948. Gaitan's murder was an event that was so dense, so compacted with unanswered desire, and that standard observational metrics offered no insights into its factual meaning. Historians have largely given up trying to figure out the particularities of Gaitan's killing, leaving it to fiction writers and playwrights to ponder its significance. Juan Gabriel Vasquez, in his novel *The Shape of Ruins*, writes that he writes about growing up in the shadow not of Gaitan's murder, but of obsessions with Gaitan's murder, with endless speculation as to who was behind the killing and counterfactuals of what Colombia might have been like if Gaitan had lived and been elected president. The novel's protagonist points out that Colombia's collective neurosis is shared with many other nations, especially those that have experienced the execution of leaders who are remembered as promising a different path than the one taken, frustrated hopes, unrequited dreams, fantasies of what a country might have been. Thank you.
Hello. You all are very hard acts to follow. My name is Angela Florino. I'm reading from my novel, The Wilderness. I had a lot of time to think about what I was going to read, and I thought I was going to read something that was like longer than it was supposed to be and very sexy. And then I remembered that my mother, who died 6 years ago, had actually been in this room before seeing me read, and she would have said to keep it cute and keep it brief. So I'm not reading that. In the hallway, Monique discovered that the ice was not on their floor, but 2 floors down. In the elevator, she looked down at her phone, scrolling past social media images warning of famine here and there in the world, fully expecting to see kids with skeletal faces and core bellies like it was the 70s or something. Or worse, another murdered infant, a tender body broken for no reason that would ever make sense, because there existed no good reason to kill a child. The unvarnished horrors of modern warfare were on everyone's social media feeds now, had been for months. And the truly bleak thing was that there seemed to be just as many people outraged by the carnage as onlookers cheering it on. The more powerful a person was, a politician, a celebrity, or even just a person who made a good living online, the more they seemed fine with or were determined to be silent about the preventable misery of others, whether they be Palestinian, Sudanese, Congolese, or Haitian. What was all of this connectivity for then? Money, of course. Monique knew this intimately, but she was not so jaded as to have lost all hope that it could be harnessed for some higher good as well. She had written as much in a post just 2 days ago. It had gone semi-viral, reaching almost 10% of her 114,000 social media followers and almost as many non-followers. A less controversial post of just her face and a short poem would do better numbers, of course. Last week she posted, "Things I'm scared of," which ain't the same as being afraid. Men in camouflage. July weather in most places now. Book bans, but also the way people talk about book bans. Men who walk close behind you on the street at night, and when you turn around and look at them in the eye, refuse to say anything. Blonde ponytails swinging. The tiny poem, dashed off during a subway ride, had corralled 3,000 new followers, but it also made her queasy as the days went by. It was too easy to anticipate what people wanted from her, to give them the kind of pinky toe deep bon mot that was no skin off anyone's back to reshare, to make mean whatever they wanted it to mean on their own feeds. It felt like tithing to balance these posts with ones about US-funded genocide or corrupt politicians, especially if she lost followers as a result. She had to let some money go so that her soul might fare better in the long term. Not until the door opened, a man entered, and the elevator began to go down, did Monique realize that she'd been going up by mistake. "I'm sorry," the man said, which prompted Monique to look up from her phone. He was about her age, maybe on the far side of mid-40s, trim, light-skinned, with a very faint mustache and full lips that were very pink. He wore a black baseball cap that had the phrase "kitchen, culture," period, embroidered on it in white, punctuation and all. "This is random," he said, "but I think we follow each other online. Thank you."
Hi, I'm Adam Dalva, the president of the National Book Critics Circle. Can we just give one more round of applause to our fabulous readers? It was so good. Wasn't it so good? It was wonderful. Thank you for being so generous with your time tonight, for writing these spectacular books. You make all the work of criticism worthwhile. We can't wait to keep celebrating you tomorrow night. And for those in the audience, I think the best way to celebrate these writers is to buy their books, which are out in the lobby. You should buy all 25 of them. Thank you also to the unbelievable volunteer board of the NBCC for choosing these books. Thank you so much. Thank you to our interpreters. Thank you, Colette Bancroft. Colette, we love you, and That's One Song was pitch perfect. Thank you to Jared and Julia Drake from Wildbound for incredibly generously donating the live stream tonight. And thank you to Adrienne, Laura, and Ian for running it. Thank you to the, no adjective, exceptional Lori Lynn Turner. Thank you to the New School. We love you, Lori Lynn. Thank you, Christoph Ermscher and Iris Jamal Dunkel. They organized everything tonight. Thank you. The NBCC is entirely member and donation supported, so please do go to our website and give what you can, or even better, join our organization. We'd love to have you. That's it for me. We'll see you all tomorrow night. Thank you again.